Hi, I said I would do a review session today on Thursday. My idea is that I will go over basically how to do truth tables and um, how to do translations. Uh, anyway, today I kind of rescheduled it because of a health issue, and so nobody's here, but maybe some people might show up. I thought I'm going to make a video because I promised it. I will do that regardless. That way people can kind of see the video and that might help them a little bit. But so I'm going to do this. I'm talking in a classroom to absolutely nobody at the moment, which may not be a decreased number of people listening to me on a typical day. It's a joke. Actually, it kind of reminds me, I had a cousin who just finished medical school, and he was telling me that when the first year or two you do classrooms, but you have to get labs and do all this other stuff, and so it's sometimes hard to make it to the class, and so every lecture is recorded, and oftentimes people will, you watch all the lectures and you do all this stuff, but oftentimes you don't make it to the class, and so oftentimes these big lecture halls will have one or two or no students, and the professor will still give their lecture and do their whole discussion to basically a camera at the back of the room, because everything's then put through, because basically there's so much other stuff that you can't guarantee the time issues, and so that allows for other people to do it other times. So I kind of feel a little bit like that, like, I'm teaching basically to a camera, but I guess it's not an unusual practice, I suppose. I don't know. Anyway, so I'm going to go ahead and talk about how to translate statements into symbolic logic. Basically, there are 5 symbolic logic operators. Well, to begin with, one of the first things is that when we did categorical logic, we would take the subject, and it would be one letter, and the predicate, and it would be a separate letter. In this case, we're no longer breaking the subject and predicate apart. If the subject is, whatever, and the predicate something else, we're not looking at those as separate things. We're just looking at the statement as a whole, as a statement. And we simply we'll abbreviate that with like a capital letter, like the letter A, or the letter B, or F, or Q, or whatever works. I mean, if the example has Bob, then you might use B, or, if there's running, you might use R, things like that. But the idea here is if it says something like Bob is running, it wouldn't be something with the name of Bob is doing an act of running. So, Bob is R. No, it would just simply be B, and that would be it, because it's one thought, one idea, one simple statement. And a capital letter is a simple statement. Now, you'll notice in the book that sometimes they also use lowercase letters. And lowercase letters basically are used to say, this is representing a statement. It could be a simple statement, it could be a complex statement, it could be a statement like B plus Q, or B and Q, or it could be 83 symbols in a row, but that can symbolize something more complex. An uppercase letter is used to basically to say, here is a simple statement, something like Bob is running, the grass is tall, Joe is tired, something like that. And so one sentence, one simple idea, one letter. But the reality is not every sentence is as simple as one idea. Sometimes there's a relation between those ideas. Like, if Bill is coming, then Joe is coming. If Linda is here, then Jill won't be here. And so there's several ideas. First of all, Jill won't be here is symbolizing something like it's the opposite of Jill will be here. So it's basically symbolizing not Jill being here, not Jay. And so we have basically 5 operators that allow us to make sense of how these simple statements interact and create more complex statements that we can then use the letters for. And so one of the first things I do, and it's important, this module is not a long module, it's not a complex module. Translating statements takes a little bit of practice, a few hours, but you should be able to get it down fairly quickly. But it becomes so important to how you do truth functional logic, and how you do more of the sentential logic, the stuff that we'll do in Module 9. And so it is important that you know what these statements mean and how you translate things into these statements. If you don't understand that, then you have a little bit of a problem. Now, with that said, what I would typically do in a classroom class, and it's not really possible to do, I don't think it works well here, but one of the things I would do in a classroom class is the first day I would go over what I'm going to do here on the board, and I would go over these 5 operators, and I would say, here's the operator, how it's symbolized, here's the name of it, here's what function it performs, and here's some of the key words it translates. And I'll do that chart up here in just a second. And what I would typically do is on the next class period, say that was on Monday, then Wednesday students would have to come in and I would give them basically a sheet of paper, blank, and they would have to recreate that entire chart. They'd have to put plus, the symbol, they'd have to write the word plus, which is the name, they'd have to put the operation, which is addition or conjunction, I guess it's probably conjunction, and then they would give some of the words that translate, like and, but, also, and then they would go on, they'd do the next one, which would be a little bar or a little minus sign. And they call it bar in logic, and it fulfills the function of negation. And then they would put some of the things that it translates, like not, no, those would be your main key ones. That would be that. And so those would basically be, you would have to do it. And I think that's something that even though you don't have to do that in this class because it's online and I can't really, in a very, let's say, very simple way, do this. I think that it's still a positive or something that you should consider doing is going ahead and after you've kind of looked at this chart, memorize the chart, and then do it for yourself. If you want to do well and you want to kind of get this stuff down, I would do that. And then I would also go through the book and do every possible translation and check your work and then go back through it again if you're not comfortable and then go back through it again. Because by the time you get through the examples in the book, you'll be able to pass the exam. And the exam actually does have you doing translations, so don't think that you'll be like, oh, well, it's going to be multiple choice. It's not multiple choice. I'm telling you that right now. It is not a multiple choice exam. It is, I give you a statement like, Bill is not coming to the party, and you have to translate that. Okay. So to start it off, there are 5 main operators, or operations or operators. So I've got the green mark over there so I know where the edge of my board is for you to see. Hopefully, when I start here, probably put one about here, that way I don't go over that line either. Okay, so there are 5 main operators. The first one is one that looks like a little plus sign. Well, you know what? No, I'm going to start with a different one. Sorry. The first one I'll start with is one that we call the symbol. Is that too high? It is too high. Okay, sorry. I'm trying to kind of get used to this. You have the symbol, the name, what you call it, the operation, and what it translates. And there are 5 of them. Okay? And the first one, I'm going to actually move this line over just a little bit because you don't need that much room. The first one is what we call bar. It's just like a negative or a minus sign, but we call it bar because it's a bar. Now, different logical systems use different operators. For example, in some of the books I've used, they will use, I was going to see if I can get some of that shadow off the board. And some of the symbols, some of the systems we use, they use a thing called tilde. It basically is just a negation, and it's called bar in our case, in our book. In our class, we use the name bar. And it performs the operation of negation. And basically, all that bar is doing is saying no or not. It's not saying anything else. It's not saying anything less. It's just basically saying that's not the case. So if I say Bob is not tall, then I'm basically saying, instead of just Bob is tall is the letter B, but then if I want to say he's not tall, so I know that Bob is not tall has a relationship, instead of saying like Bob is tall and Bob is not tall is C, now we don't know that these two actually have any correspondence or shared meaning. So instead of translating them as completely separate letters, what we would do is we would translate one as Bob is tall and the other one is Bob is not tall. And we would just simply put a bar in front of it, and that means it's not the case. So what does it translate? It translates the ideas of no and not. And so anytime you see something like it isn't the case, no, not that way, anything like that, you are basically using a bar. The bar is going to be there to say you have the simple statement saying this is the case, and then to symbolize that not case, you use the bar. Now, as far as it goes, just sort of as some help that you might find in this, there is a table in your book that will give all the operators, and that is a nice thing to look at. And that's table 5.1 on page 125 in your book. And so you might want to just look at that as well. Now, the next one is what we call the plus sign. It is just like a mathematical plus sign. It does the job of conjunction. It's the operation it performs. It's the fancy name. Conjunction means to conjoin or to bring together. And so a plus sign is translating the idea of this and that. Most commonly, it will translate the word and. If I say Bob and Joe are coming, well, that's not just one idea. There's two ideas. There's an idea that Bob's coming and the idea that Joe is coming. And so I would use a plus to signify that it's both B and J. And if I want to say, for example, Jill will be there and, Sarah will be there, then I would put J plus S. It's just simply saying there's two ideas. The simple idea is Jill will be there. The other idea is Sarah will be there. And the and, saying both of them are true, conjunction is with a plus sign. Now, and is the most common way you would do it, but you might also find words like but or also. Some words like this, anything as well as might also be doing that function of trying to say that's also the case, and that's kind of doing a plus function. So sometimes when you see those in ordinary language, you might have those. Now, one thing to keep in mind is but. Sometimes people say, well, but isn't the same as and. Well, from an ordinary language standpoint, if I say Joe's coming but Bill isn't, then it's sort of suggesting that something wasn't suspected. But at the end of the day, if I say Joe is coming but so is Sarah, then I'm also just saying and. I'm not saying anything different than and. And so if I'm saying Joe is coming but Sarah is also coming, I'm really saying Joe and Sarah are coming. But it has a little bit more meaning when I say it to you, but when we symbolize it, we strip away some of that meaning from our ordinary language to get to the symbolic form. The next one is what we call wedge. A wedge is like a V or a little wedge symbol. And what it performs the function of is what we call disjunction. Disjunction is the idea of basically or. And so instead of saying like Bob, if I said Bob and Sarah are coming, we have the simple idea of Bob is coming, Sarah is coming, we would say plus because it's and. But if I said Bob or Sarah is coming, then we would use the wedge. It's one or the other. It could be both. There's no reason it couldn't be both, but we use that to do that. Now, it can also translate words like unless. And sometimes people go, unless seems to have like a hypothetical syllogism approach, but for the most part, unless means this or that. If I say you're going to do that, or we're going to be there unless something else comes up, I'm saying basically we'll be there. So, we'll be there will be one thing, W. Unless something comes up, S is something comes up. So we'll be there or something came up is basically all it's saying. It translates into the word or. I'm going to stop this right here and I'll restart it because I'm about to my 15-minute limit.